Hey everyone, welcome. I am going to give just a few moments here to make sure everybody is getting logged in. We'll get started in just a moment. Seeing everybody's getting logged in. I'm so excited to have everyone here today. So, alrighty, as everybody's coming in, I'll go ahead and get started. A quick thank you and welcome to everybody to our second annual Work Plus Fall Conference. My name is Abby Anderson. I'm the program coordinator for Work Plus, and I'm super excited to welcome all of our working learners, faculty, staff members that are joining us today. Before we really get started into the conference, I do want to give a quick shout out to a couple of the watch parties that we have going on joining us today. Of course, ideally, we would love to be sharing this time in person. However, with this conference being virtual, we are able to have representation from all of our Phoenix, Metro Phoenix campuses, as well as our Lake Havasu City location. We actually have watch parties happening at all of the campuses for this conference. So I do want to give just a couple special shout outs to them. So we do have Work Plus participants coming to us from, like I said, ASU at Lake Havasu. Another special shout out to our friends at the Student Success Center right here in Tempe. We have a couple different watch parties with the American Indian Student Support Services, again, here at Tempe, Polytechnic, West. We have friends from University Academic Success Program joining us, having watch parties again at Phoenix, West, downtown here in Tempe. I'm so excited that you all are joining us. And last but not least, I can't forget our friends with the Career and Professional Development Services joining us today at the downtown Phoenix campus. Again, thank you all for taking time to come together and join us this afternoon. We have an exciting conference ahead of us. Real quick, I do want to just address, we do have workbooks that have been passed out. These are workbooks for you to follow along with our speakers. These are yours to take notes, doodle in as you please. If you did not receive one of these, do not worry. We do have a digital version for you all to download. Scott's throwing that in the chat for you now. Like I said, feel free to use that link, download the workbook. As soon as you download it, you'll be able to access and type your notes in there as you please. Again, use those as you want. These are strictly just for you to use. You are not turning these into anybody. So again, use these as you would like. Oh, and I do want to also say this workbook was put together by one of our very own working learners here at the Work Plus program office. So again, just wanting to highlight some of the work that our working learners do. You all are doing amazing things for our university across the campus, across all campuses. So wanted to highlight that this was put together by one of our own working learners. As I mentioned, we do have a full agenda ahead of us for the next 90 minutes. We'll get started here in just a moment with a welcome from our program director, Scott Travis. After that, we will get started with our first speaker. We have our very own professor from here at ASU, Brian David Johnson, talking to us about the future of work. After Professor Johnson, we will hear from Senior Project Manager of Wellbeing and Engagement, Carrie Sanderson, on job crafting. And then last but not least, we will be wrapping up our session today with a little working learner Q&A discussion about getting the most out of your current job. So with all of that being said, I will go ahead and introduce Scott Travis, again, Program Director for Work Plus. Thank you for being here, Scott. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Abby, and good afternoon, everyone. As Abby said, my name is Scott Travis. I'm the Program Director for Work Plus. Super excited to welcome everyone to our second annual Fall Conference. This time last year, we were kind of kicking off our first ever Fall Conference. And since then, the program has grown quite a bit. We've more than doubled in size, serving more than 1,500 working learners and over 130 supervisors. And we're really excited for that continued growth of the program, as our goal has always been to make this work available for all working learners, no matter where they work, no matter what they do. I do want to take some time to give a big shout out to all of the supervisors that are joining us here today. We know that supervisors play a significant role in working learner success across our university, and I'm so thankful that our student employees have you all to guide and mentor them on their working and learning journey here at ASU. So with that being said, we have a really great conference, great speakers. I hope everyone enjoys it. And Abby, I'll kick it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. So like I said before, we are getting started with the future of work. Again, I'm excited to introduce Professor Brian David Johnson. A little background with Brian David Johnson here. From 2009 to 2016, he was the Intel Corporation's first ever futurist. As mentioned earlier, of course, Professor Johnson is a professor here at ASU with the Global Futures Laboratory and School for the Future of Innovation and Society. And additionally, he has also worked in private practices with a broad range of groups, including governments, militaries, corporations, nonprofits, and startups to help them envision their futures. And last but not least that I have here with Professor Johnson, he also holds over 40 patents and is the best-selling author of both science fiction and fact books. We should have time at the end of his session here for some Q&As. If you have any questions as he's going through, please feel free to submit those in the Q&A portion of this webinar. If we do not get a chance to answer your questions, he has agreed to get those answered for us after the conference, and I will be able to share those all with you. So without further ado, go ahead, Professor Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Abby, and it's a pleasure for me to be here and to talk to all of you today at the Work Plus conference. Basically, when I was talking to the team about doing this keynote and being able to talk to you, when I saw the title of the conference, Job Crafting, Storytelling, and the Future of Work, I was super excited because as a futurist and thinking about these things and thinking about the future of work, really what you're going to be seeing today is really in line with a lot of my work and a lot of the work that I do as a futurist and the work that I do as a professor at ASU working with students. So as Abby said, we're going to save some time for Q&A, maybe a little more than 5 minutes, but please submit that. Please know you can ask me anything. So as she mentioned, I'm a futurist and I've been doing this for about 25 years. People ask me anything. So you can talk about job crafting, the future of work, storytelling, but also people ask me crazy stuff about the zombie apocalypse. When will the robots rise and take over us? My favorite is I spent a lot of time in schools with K through 12. I had a group of 10-year-old boys ask me how to build a Death Star. And I'm a physics geek, if you haven't seen from what's behind me, so I started talking to them and we really got into it. So you can ask me anything at all. And as Abby said, I'm completely signed in. Again, being the futurist and the futurist in residence at ASU and being a professor, I am a resource for all of you. So if you have any questions at all, if you have any follow-up, believe me, I am here as a resource for you as a part of the university. So please put those questions in as well. If you don't have that workbook, download it because it's really cool, because a lot of it is, and I need to get a copy of that, the physical copy, because a lot of it really kind of comes from, the thinking is very similar to my book, The Future You, which I'm going to talk about today, which is kind of thinking about this and getting folks to think about the future and get prepared for the future and really shape the future of not only work, but the future of your work. So I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes again, and then we'll do that Q&A, and then of course we'll move on. So as Abby said, I'm Brian David Johnson. I'm a futurist. So it's my job to work with organizations to look 10 years out into the future. I model both positive and negative futures. And then I'm an applied futurist, which means I do it for organizations. And then I backcast with them and say, okay, well, what do you need to do today, tomorrow, 5 years from now to move towards that positive future and away from the negative future? So in that way, I am an optimist. So I should probably tell that to you right now. I am a declared optimist as a futurist. By the way, this is not a popular thing. Turns out people love negative futurists. They love futurists that get up and say, everything is going to end on Tuesday. I'm not that type of futurist because I've been doing this, as I said, for over 25 years. I do 10 years out. So I've seen the futures that I've worked on, I've seen them happen. And I've learned that the future is built by people. People build their own future. Organizations build their own future. So you will build your own future in the future of your life, of your family, of your community, of ASU. And the future is built when people get together at organizations and at groups like this. So it's incredibly important sort of gathering and doing that type of work. And that's why I'm an optimist. So I tell people, why would you get together and build a future that's terrible, that sucks? Like, get together and build a future that's awesome. Like, build your own future, and don't let anybody else do it for you. And that's why I'm such an optimist and also love doing these kind of things, and love being at ASU. So as mentioned, I am that type of futurist. I was the chief futurist at the Intel Corporation because it takes them 10 years to design, develop, and deploy a chip. So that was my job, to say, what will people want to do with technology 10 years in the future? To date myself, I was brought in the early 2000s to do smart TV. I had this crazy idea and forecast that someday we would all be using the internet to watch television. People laughed at me in my face. But that idea of saying, wouldn't it be awesome of what we could do? Back in 2016, I stepped down to actually come to ASU. I still have a private practice, as Abby mentioned, where I do this with other folks. I do a lot of work with people like MasterCard and sort of large organizations. I also do work around national security, which is why I'm at ASU. Through my threat casting lab, we do a lot of work with the United States Army. We do work with the United States Secret Service, as well as the Air Force and NATO, trying to work on issues of national security to make all of us safer. And that's really my job. But what I want to talk to you about today is sort of how you can think like a futurist, how you can take what I do and what I've been doing, designing chips, designing smart TV, working on national security. How do you actually apply it to you? How do you apply it to the future of work? This idea of crafting your job crafting and storytelling, which is so incredibly important when you're thinking about the future of work and the future of your career. So and all of this comes from, as I mentioned before, and I'm not selling a book here, but the idea is saying, a couple years ago, I had a friend say, hey, you do this for large corporations, you do it for the university. Why don't you teach this the average person to do it so that anybody could actually think like a futurist? And that's what this book really does, is it kind of gives this framework for thinking like a futurist. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And that's actually what's kind of imbued in the workbook that you have already. So the whole idea, and the reason why it's called The Future You, is when I go to people, I find that most everybody, when they talk about the future, they do it completely wrong. The vocabulary that they use, the grammar that they use is completely wrong. Because they always come to me and say, hey, BDJ, what's it going to be like in the future? How do I prepare for the future? What do I do? And I always tell them, you need to tell me what future you want, because you're going to build your future. Yes, you need to prepare yourself, you need to do that, but ultimately you have to sit and say, you have the ability and the capability to build the future of your life. And especially when you're crafting your career and you're starting to do this work and doing it at a place like this, I always go to people and say, what do you want your future to look like? What do you want your future not to look like? Some of that's in the workbook, to kind of go, what don't you want? Because by the way, knowing what you don't want sometimes is more important than knowing what you want, because then you can go, I know I don't want to do that. And you can start thinking about the future you. So I always ask people, so tell me the story of the future you, because storytelling is incredibly important. Right? It's important for us because human beings are story-believing machines. It's actually how our consciousness works. We tell stories. It's our currency, actually. That's how we talk to each other, is we tell stories about ourselves and what we did and what we had for lunch and what we want to do in the future. So I always tell people, sit down and start writing out, tell me the story of the future you, and especially when it comes to work. But don't just tell me I want to do this job or that job. No, that's not good enough. I want you to give me the details. Tell me the story. What will a Tuesday be like for the future you in your career and your job? What will you do for breakfast? What will the office be like or not office? What will your coworkers be like, or will you work by like, tell me that story. What do you want it to be like? What do you want your life to be like? And write it down. And you can even ask yourself like crazy questions. Like we kind of went through and we asked people before, like, as you're going through and doing this, what do you want it to smell like? What do you want to have for lunch? What do you want your commute to be like? Who do you want to work with? How do you want to work with people? And try to be getting into those details, because the details are really important, and write it down. So that story of the future you is really, really important, and push yourself to really get out there, right? Get past what's in front of you and really say, this is the future that I want, and write it down. So once you've done that, and that's why writing it down is so important, and workbooks are so important, because then the next step is to say, okay, how are you going to get out to that future? How are you going to craft the future of work and the future of your work? So the first step is to identify your people. So your people is your team, and you know that. These are the people who are going to help you get to your future. And you're going to go and then tell them the story of the future you. You're going to say, this is what I want. And you're going to give them lots of detail. right? And hopefully they might agree with you, or they might disagree with you. And they say, well, maybe you should think about this and maybe think about that. But by telling that story, it starts to make that future manifest. You start creating grooves in your brain and you start getting more comfortable with it. It starts making it more real. And you start actually then building it out. Every time you tell a story, you tell it in a little bit of a different way and you get more details. And so telling that story will also help hold you accountable to your team, because your team can kind of help you go along as you're doing it. Also, one of the things that's really important when you're doing that, as you're telling the story of the future you to your team, it's also going to help identify toxic people. Now, we all know toxic people. We've all had toxic people in our lives, because these are the people, when they tell you, when you say, this is the future you, they'll say, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you don't want to do that. These are people who are pulling your energy away from you. You need to get away from them as quickly as possible. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do in your personal life, but as you're crafting your future, these people are only going to take that away from you. You want people who are going to help propel you to that future. So that's step number one. Take the story of the future you, take this workbook, take what you've done, and start talking to people about it. Talk to your team, talk to the people who are going to support you. The next step is to identify, what are the tools, what are the things that are going to help you? These could be apps, but also these could be organizations. Oh, I don't know, like Work Plus. It's exactly what you're doing today. Getting together with organization of people. These organizations are going to help you network, help connect you with people to be able to take that forward. And so you can go to people in that organization and say, okay, this is what I want to do. Here's the story of the future me, and pretty much find out how they can help. So that's the second step. And then the third step is to start to identify the experts. So these are the people who have done it before. They may not have the exact future that you want, because you're an individual, you're special. Everybody has their own future. But they may live next door to your future, right? They may be in the same field, they may do that. And this is where that story of the future you becomes so important, because if you identify them and you ask to get some of their time and you tell them that story, you're going to be really surprised how much they're going to help you. Because anybody who has been successful knows that it's all about your social network, and it's all about helping other people. And everybody has had those mentors, those people who have helped pull them up. So, and that's why that story of the future you is, because you're going to be kind of nervous the first time you do it. So being able just to say, well, here's what I'm thinking about doing. So that's what you've done. So you've kind of gone out, you've written down the story of the future you, you've gotten really specific around the job and what you want to do and things like that. Now you've gone and taken that and you've taken it out and you've rehearsed it. You've gone to people and you've talked to your team. You've identified maybe some toxic people, gotten rid of them. Great. Then you found the tools and the things that are going to help you as well. Great. You're going to remember all those. And then you're going to go to those experts, because what they're going to help you do as well is they might say, that's good, but you may want to change this a little bit and change that a little bit. And that's the important thing to remember as you're crafting the future of work and the future of what you want, is it's okay to change. As you learn more, as you go out and talk to people, that story of the future you is going to change. You're going to be editing it constantly. And that's a good thing. But that's why writing it down is so important, because it gives you something to kind of always refer back to. So once you've done all that, then we're going to backcast. Remember, I told you I'm an applied futurist. So that means you're going to turn around and look backwards. And so with that, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, here's that future you that you've really got a detailed breakdown of. Then you're going to say, okay, here's where I am today. And then I want you to say, okay, how do you know you're halfway? What's going to make you feel like you're halfway? That could be part of a degree program. That could be a certain part in a job progression. It could be anywhere. Just something that's going to make you feel like, okay, that feels about, I'm about halfway there. And then you write that down. Then once you've done that, then you split it again and say, what's going to make me feel like I'm partway? I'm not there. I know I'm on the road. I'm making some progress, but I'm going to feel like, okay, I'm starting to build my momentum. I'm starting to get there. Oftentimes this is doing some interviews. This could be having some meetings. This could be, like I said, be finding a different degree program. It's up to you, but something that makes you feel like you're partway. You know, you've started to gain the momentum. So now that you've charted out halfway and partway, then the final step is to say, what can you do on Monday? What is the one tiny little step that you can take that's going to make you feel like, hey, you know what? I'm taking that first step. And that could be a Google search, that could be identifying your team, that could be writing down the future you, that could be identifying different programs or different areas, sort of anything that you can do, but just kind of write it down, because what it starts to do is it starts to show you a very accomplishable map to say, here's where I want to go. I've talked to people about it, and these are the steps that I can take all along the way. And you'll find that you start to gain that momentum. and you can start to get there. And that's why sort of you need to kind of, it gives you that ability to say, all right, I can now chart that out. And at the core of that is to really believe the fact that you have the power and the agency and the ability to craft and to build that future you. And that's really the future of work in general. People always ask me, I do a lot of work, as you can imagine, during the pandemic. I do a lot of work with CEOs and a lot of work with trade associations, and people always ask me, what is the future of work? What does it look like? What should the future of my corporation be? And I apply the exact same thing. I say, well, what do you want it to be? You know, what do you want the future of work to be? Because if the pandemic taught us nothing else, is that we have the ability to be flexible. We have the ability to change. We had the ability to come through these very dark days, and we're still getting through them. But think of all the things that we were able to do. And I think now is a really important time to be going about this as a part of your career and about work, because people have realized how much more freedom and flexibility that we have, how much more agency we have to craft that future. And then also, as you're going through the kind of last bit that I'll leave you with, and I'm gonna end with a challenge. So if anybody's got any questions, we're almost there. Got about 2 more minutes. About 5 more minutes. I'm so looking at my clock. So the idea is to say, as you go through, again, what is that future you want? And then as you go and talk to people to understand, and I can tell you this as a futurist who work with corporations, that talent, passionate people who want to do work in an area, want to have an effect, whether it be in business, whether it be for the community, whether it be for the climate and for the planet, whatever you want to do and wherever you want to get it done, your time is the most important thing. So as you go to organizations and as you approach people, understand that those organizations need you more than you need them. Now, I don't say that from a point of arrogance. I actually would say it, and you should hear it from a point of humility, because the most important asset of any organization is its people, and especially passionate people who are willing to do the work. But to understand that if you go to some place and they're not supporting you, they're not embracing the cultures and the values that you have, then you don't want to be there, because you're not going to thrive. And to always understand that it really is about the people, that ultimately everything we do, that's why if you think about the future you, all I really talked about was people. There was a little bit I talked about apps and organizations, but most of what I talked about was people. Everything we do is about people. It begins with people and it ends with people. And there might be some little things in between, but it's always about people. So understanding that work environment that you want to be in, and that you are comfortable in, and that you feel supported in is very, very important, especially as you start to give of your time and also of your energy and of your passion. So as we start to get closer to the Q&A, remember you can ask me anything. I want to go back to this challenge, is to say and to have everybody kind of sit with that idea of understanding that, you know, the way that you change your future. And I've learned this over the last 25 years. And people have asked me all the times, not only how do you predict the future, because I don't predict the future, I work to build the future. People ask me, how do we make a better future, right? How do I make a better future for myself? And that's why I really like this conference, because I always tell people the way you change the future is you change the story that people tell themselves about the future that they will live in. Because if you can change that story, you will make different decisions. And I've seen it happen. I saw it happen at the Intel Corporation when we were working on smart TVs and what a computer could be and what that might look like. If you can change that story, people make different education decisions, job decisions, purchase decisions. That story is really, really important. But you also have to understand that in the crafting of that story and the crafting of your journey through the future of work and your career is to really embrace the fact that you will build that, and to ask yourself, what is the future you want and what is the future you want to avoid? And then what are those steps that you are going to take? What are you going to do about it? What are those stories that you are going to tell? And who are the people that you're going to reach out to? Because if you're lucky, like I said, they may disagree with you, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with disagreements. There's nothing wrong with getting different opinions and things like that. But it's really, really important to be able to have those interactions with those people, because that's really what the future of work is all about. It's not about technology. It's not about places, not about that. It's actually about human beings interacting with other human beings. And that's what I always try to center people on as a futurist, is to say, I am a futurist, I am a technological futurist who worked in Silicon Valley for many years, but I know that it's the most important thing is people, and keeping people at the center of work, and people at the center of your life, and knowing that the ability to communicate and collaborate and being able to be curious with those people, even if you find somebody that you don't like, and we all run into people we just don't like. I always push people to be curious and go, oh, why? Why don't you like them? Like, let's think about it. Let's find out. And so I'm always sort of kind of digging into that and pushing myself to kind of figure out, okay, how do I continue to interact with those people? Because that's where that future of work really, really happens. Again, we can, if you want in the Q&A, we can talk about AI and autonomy, and we can talk about blockchain and talk about all the things that people usually want to talk about, but I'm always bringing it back to people and that agency that you have as a way to do it. So I rushed through my stuff so we would have time for as many questions as possible. So I think, Abby, I throw it back to you to see if we've got any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was great. So we do have a few questions. The first one that I'm seeing right here in our Q&A, again, everybody, I see Scott did put it in the chat, but just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please do utilize this Q&A option here in the webinar. But Brian, back to the question. So this first one that I'm seeing says, how do you recommend recording their stories? Is this through their CVs? Is this in the resume? How do you recommend them recording that story?
Well, the first way to do it, and again, I'm a writer. So Abby mentioned this at the beginning. So I'm a word nerd. If you haven't, so this is a real background, by the way. This is actually real books. So I'm a straight up word nerd. I love everything science. I love everything science fiction. I'm a writer. And so for me, it's this. I mean, I think it's very important, and you don't have to do this, but for me, and I write about this in my book, writing it down in your own handwriting to me is incredibly important, because it again shows that humanity. You see that it comes from you, it comes from your hand. And it's a way to keep going back to it. And it also feels kind of messy. That's every book, and I've written over 10 books. Every book that I've written I write it out by hand. Now, I don't write the whole thing, but I start writing it out by hand because it allows you the flexibility to change it and then get it and get it wrong and scratch it out and tear it up and throw it at the wall and start again and all that. So that's why I'm a big fan of that. Now, for many folks, they don't really love that tactile bit of writing. And so I think, punching it into your phone or punching it into your computer, that's fine as well. Actually, many of my books, I've written the second draft as I've sat on a plane like this. I actually did write, I wrote a book called Screen Future a long time ago about the future of TV. And I wrote the first draft on my phone because I was on planes flying all over the world, kind of doing this sort of stuff. But again, I think that tactile nature of kind of doing it and then going back and revising it. And then at that point, once you have it, as you're sharing it with your team, you can share it via email, whatever. Sometimes you can put it up on Medium. Oftentimes there's spots on LinkedIn that have the ability to kind of put that in there. But I think you want to be careful in the beginning when you're recording that story of the future you, is to go to your team first. And your team is different than your boss. Your team is different than your coworkers. Sometimes your coworkers are your team, but they're not. Because again, it's like when you do collaborators. If any of you have taken creative writing, if any of you have been in any sort of those creative classes or even creative coding, you know that your team is a little bit different. So you can let your guard down a little bit more. You don't have to be so, sort of buttoned up. And then I think what it allow you to do is you're going around, and then once you get to those experts, you're going to start getting that bio. That, as I say, I call people the back of the book bio, right? That says, here's me in a paragraph, which by the way is ridiculous. You can't describe yourself in a paragraph. That's stupid. That's like so limiting to say I can describe myself in a paragraph, but you just have to, because for sort of the sake of the work that we do. So I think it's an evolution, and as an author, I would say, know your audience. I think that's the final thing, is when you're telling the story of the future you, know who you're telling it to. If you're telling it to your team, to your boss, to a potential hire, to a professor, kind of making sure that you're then crafting it in the right way so that you know who you're talking to. And that really applies for, your sort of your entire life as you start doing this reaching out. And to also how you present yourself in social media, how you present yourself in emails and all that, knowing the audience that you're going to.
Wow, Brian, it's like, have you seen my schedule for the rest of our year? All of our next professional development events for our working learners here. We have best interview practices. So telling that story to, if it's a job interview, is it grad school interview? The one following that is building your professional presence online. What should you be posting on social media? What you shouldn't be posting? It's like you've taken a sneak peek at all of my events.
It's like I'm a futurist.
Like you're a futurist. Wild. I do have another question. It's actually two questions that they kind of go hand in hand. So I'm going to put these two together. So once they've followed these steps, they've created their future and decided what they need to do to get out there. How often should they be reevaluating and making revisions to that? What should the revision process look like? And then my second piece with that, I did have somebody also ask if you could kind of explain step 2 again, because they missed it.
Do you remember which one was step 2?
I don't. That's why I was hoping you knew, Brian.
Okay. So let's do the revision part first.
Yes.
So the revision part, in the beginning, you'll be revising a lot. So it's like when you're writing a story or you're writing a paper or you're writing anything, right? You're revising kind of constantly as you're having conversations with people. And then as you go through, you'll probably revise less and less and less, and it'll be more like a script. It'll be more like, when you get up and introduce yourself at an event or when you're at a class and you say, this is who I am, again, the back of the book thing. But here's a really interesting thing. Then it'll change. And this is, so I'm going to tell you a story from the book. It doesn't have to do with the future of work, but it shows you how somebody has applied this. So I was working with a gentleman who's super brilliant biologist in Boston. He wanted to get a house. He was super intelligent when it came to biology and super stupid when it came to money. And so he was like, can you help me? And I was like, well, I'm not a financial person, but let me tell you how I think about it. And so he and his husband and their 2 kids, they had an apartment and they wanted to get a house and they wanted to buy it, all that type of stuff. So we did this whole thing, and when I had him write out the future you, and he did that, and he kind of heard me do that. And I said, and then he went back to his team, which was his family and his realtor. And so they all got together. It turns out they started future casting together. He said the family that future casts together stays together. So they had a really good time. It was this really kind of collaborative thing that they were doing. But for him, I said, you got to go to the neighborhood where you want to live. You got to go to the houses. You got to, if you can, get an Airbnb or whatever and actually go and stay there. And he was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so he went and did that. And then I came back. So I was talking with him and then I left and I was traveling all around and I came back and we were barbecuing at his apartment and we were standing out on the balcony and he leans over. He's like, BDJ, I got to confess something to you. I said, what's that? He said, I hate grass. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I always wanted the house with the picket fence and the yard and all that type of stuff. And turns out the family went and stayed at a place and he hated grass, hated taking care of it, hated the smell of it, hated all that. And he was like, it completely changed sort of my vision of the future. So he revised, but he was deep in that future before he revised it. But I think when it gets to the future of work in your career, to give yourself the flexibility and the creativity to say you don't like grass. You may go and say, I thought I wanted to be a lab tech. I thought I wanted to, turns out I hate the smell of formaldehyde, right? Who knows? You don't know. But as you live through that, I think you will kind of naturally go as you're being that storyteller and being able to do it. So part of it is I think you'll do a lot of revision in the beginning, and then you'll just be really sort of sensitive to it as you're going along, but allowing yourself that ability to revise that or do a version 2.0 of yourself. For the person who asked about the step, watch this, in like 30 seconds, I'm going to do the whole thing. So what you want to do is you want to sit down and write the future you want to tell that story and get into lots and lots of details and get lots of that. Once you have that, you take that story of the future you, write it down, then you go and you identify your team. These are the people who are going to help you. They're going to propel you out into the future. Though that from an audience member, they're a trusted audience. When you're doing that, you'll tell them that story and you'll rehearse it and you'll change it and you'll edit it. You might even identify toxic people. You want to get rid of them. They're not good. They're not going to help you. They're pulling away your energy. Don't focus on them. You're not going to change their mind. You want people who are there to support you. So then you found your team. The next step is tools. So tools these are the technologies, the organizations, the different areas or community groups that are going to help you do it. They're not people, but they're things that are going to help also push you forward. Again, Work Plus As Abby said, this is the exact type of thing. This is a tool that's going to help you craft the future you. The final step is to go and talk to experts, people who have done it before. You go to them. That's where you've more rehearsed it. And you said, here's the future me. This is the future. This is what I want, because they've kind of done it before, and they'll help revise it. They'll say, hey, you may want to tweak it here, there. You'll be really surprised that they're going to help you. And then what you're going to do is, once you've got all that, you're going to turn around and backcast and say, okay, what will it feel like to be halfway, and write that down. You'll say, what will it feel like to be partway? You'll write that down, and then you'll pick a few things that you can do on Monday. That'll be really simple Google searches, simple calls that'll really feel like you're on the path to the future you.
I was just trying to talk and I was muted. Anyway, I think, Brian, we might have time for just one more quick question. We have tons of great questions in the Q&A, so BDJ, if you don't mind, I will be sharing those with you to get those answered. We will get everybody's questions answered to them, and I will share that with you later on. But last question that I'd like to kind of address. Of course, times are changing. Things move very fast. And as a futurist, I'm sure you have a better understanding that than I do. But what are some of the best skills that we can kind of hone into to be successful in work, in your opinion?
So I mentioned a little bit this at this part. Number one is to always be curious. So always being curious, and whether it be curious about new things, curious about, it's that to say, how do you prepare to be, it's not what you learn, it's how to be a good learner. It's kind of like that. But for me, it's even just curious, just always be curious about stuff. And or even things you don't like, be curious about those, right? That type of stuff. Things that you think are really hard, be curious about that. Just that kind of open area to do it. I think that's that. The other one is that communications part, where that's why understanding and being, I always tell people, if you want to future-proof your career, be the best human you can be. Because, right, humans like other humans, and we need to communicate. And it's what I teach in my classes and what I tell people when I work with them as a futurist, but in anything we do. But if you wanted to be a futurist, like, you could be the best futurist in the world, but if you can't communicate it, and you can't communicate it appropriately to the right people and the right audiences, you're not going to be as successful. And those communication tools, and some people are not verbal communicators, some people are written down, that's fine. Some people, however you're going to communicate, and understand that you're building that in your career, but that part of it is so important, because you're always going to use that throughout the whole thing. And then I think the final pit, and nobody ever believes me when I say this, but it's really true. You got to pick and be passionate about what you do. You really do. It doesn't mean you have to love it. It doesn't mean it has to be the thing that, again, I often tell people, if you really, really, really want to be a painter and you really enjoy it, you may not want to try to get paid for it, because it's a different thing. And you need to understand that. But that idea of finding something that you're passionate about, because again, you're going to put so much more of yourself into it, and understanding that changes through time. We all have multiple careers in our lives, but I think that curiosity, that communication, and then that passion is so incredibly important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Professor Johnson, for taking the time to join us today. Just a quick takeaway that I kind of got from your presentation there. You'd mentioned, how we are in control and we can make our own futures, right? So these working learners, the professional staff, everybody joining us today, right? We are in control of that. And that just really hit home with me, because here at Work Plus, we like to think about the fact that it doesn't matter what these student employees, what these students are doing now, or even necessarily where they're going in the future, but to be able to give them that framework for success in their own futures. So that just really, really hit home with me. And then another good little quote that I kind of got that's going to stick with me, and bear with me because I may be a little off here, but the way that you change the future is changing the story that you tell people. And I love that, and that really just stuck with me. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, Brian David Johnson. It's been appreciated. And I will get those questions to you this evening or after the presentation today, and look forward to getting all those answered for the folks here today.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the conference.
Thank you. All righty, so now it is my pleasure to introduce our next presenter. Again, we have Carrie Sanderson. Carrie is a Senior Project Manager of Wellbeing and Engagement. She's also a psychology adjunct faculty at Gateway Community College. Carrie earned a Master of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And with 20 years dedicated to guiding students as they find their place in the world, Carrie's current mission is to bring well-being to not only her Gateway community, but beyond, in efforts to helping us all navigate with energy and enthusiasm to find fulfilling, successful lives. So with that being said, Ms. Carrie Sanderson, I will let you take it away.
Thank you. That was a perfect segue, kind of the end of what BDJ was talking about, being the best humans that we can be. It really is the key to living good lives and then also to being successful in our careers. So I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you about a very specific process that can help you kind of design that purpose and that meaning into your plan for future work. I love to start with this quote because I feel like this is, we're gonna talk about the ingredients that you need for the recipe that can really enable you to hear your calling more clearly and then to design an extraordinary path. So next slide. Really quickly, we're gonna just talk a little bit of context here. I'm gonna give you like the greatest hits of well-being. So hopefully it'll spark your interest. You'll get curious and want to learn a little bit more about that. But we're going to talk about why it matters, how meaning contributes to your well-being, and why it matters in your work and what that might look like. And then I'm going to demonstrate a process for you called job crafting, which takes a lot of the components that BDJ talked about and also weaves some thoughts about your well-being in there. So go ahead, next slide. Why this matters, just a couple of things you heard already why it matters. So I think I kind of don't need this slide anymore. But Barry Schwartz is a researcher and psychologist at Yale University looking at the design of work. And as humans, we're hardwired to seek meaning, to seek connection, to feel like we're adding value. And if we can design that into our workplaces, we're designing ourselves to really value that work. So valuing, we feel valued, but we're also adding value. Next slide. Why this matters to me, just super quickly, my story. As Abby mentioned, I worked for a very long time in higher ed and career services, career planning, worked with thousands and thousands of students and colleagues and job seekers. And about 7 years ago, I discovered positive psychology kind of in my search for how do we help people become the best that they can absolutely be. And it was, this light bulb went off. It was kind of like finding the music, the sheet music to a song I knew by heart. So I had the opportunity to study this. And it just became really clear through learning more about the science of well-being that it's really, really important, particularly for college students, as you're making these really important decisions about your future life. Your life now can be better too. And so learning about well-being, kind of designing it into your college career, and then moving on to more successful careers and lives based on that. Next slide. So super, super simplified. This is the positive career decision model. You can always keep these components in the back of your mind. So the things that you always want to be able to identify that you're great at it, giving you the opportunity to amplify your best authentic self. It's an amazing thing to be able to bring that to work to every day and find something that you love. BDJ talked about passion and really caring about what you're doing. Your jobs are not every minute of every day is going to be some completely amazing thing, but when you also have a sense of how it makes a difference, how the work that you're doing fits into the bigger picture of both your own personal purpose and it's serving someone else, then where all of those things come together in the middle are the sweet spot. And these ingredients are kind of sophisticated, all of these pieces, because you can kind of articulate them through a lot of self-assessment and reflection, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the way that they come together is really the recipe for success, and it's gonna kind of look different and change a little bit all through your life. Oh yeah, and you need to get paid for it. So that used to be the main point of a career conversation. but research shows that the equation is flipped, that when you're happy and you love your job and you are allowed to be your best self, you're really more successful and than if you just concentrate on the money. Next slide. So super quickly, I'm going to show you two models of well-being, and I want you to keep these in mind as ingredients that can be woven into your career plan, into your story of your future self. This is one of the most widely accepted models of well-being and has an acronym that's kind of easy to remember. The H was actually officially added kind of during post-pandemic, where we were like, yes, that part of it is obviously really, really important. But the other pieces being the opportunity to experience positive emotions, really heartfelt positivity throughout your day, not faking it, but like really being able to cultivate those experiences for yourself and others. Engagement is the opportunity to amplify your strengths. So kind of getting into that work where you're really in the zone and you're challenged enough to keep you engaged, but you're doing just this really great work. I think we can definitely all agree that relationships are the keystone to all of this. Those are the most important things, and the way that you're able to relate with other people. And then for what we're talking about today, finding meaning and purpose in your work, the M and the A kind of ride together there, meaning being the chance to make a positive difference. And then accomplishment, again, as humans, we're kind of hardwired to always achieve and to want to master things and learn new things. And so being able to do that in a way that matters to other people. Next slide. Another way to look at well-being, this is a model that was developed specifically for the college community. So the things that we're thinking most about while you're in college, at your university, learning as a working learner. The 5 C's are character, which is, again, your strengths, developing strengths of character that enable you to do and be your best. Care is learning just how to create conditions for flourishing in all the things that matter, physically, financially, financial well-being, environmentally, the environments that you're in. And then connection is building really deep relationships, but also finding a sense of belonging. Again, finding your people in your workplace, the people that care about the same stuff as you, that want to do the same work as you, can be a really transformative experience. And then finally, contribution and career, and making sure that you're thinking about your specific purpose that aligns with who you are as a person, what matters to you, and what do I want to accomplish and contribute in my life, and how can I take all of this information and use it to make decisions that not only lead to a successful career, but also to a successful life. Next slide. So to dig a little bit deeper into meaning, we're talking about meaning in work, but really meaning is a bigger umbrella over our lives. We just want to feel like our lives make sense and that we're working towards something that's important and we're connecting with people with whom we belong and build really strong bonds. So the 4 pillars of meaning that you can kind of use as story points as you're going through this process of kind of designing this work plan for yourself. Belonging, obviously, really, really important. The people around you, again, that you're a part of what's going on. Purpose is really important in terms of it being your direction. So meaning is kind of the umbrella over like, yeah, my life makes sense. I'm doing things that make sense. But purpose is really taking the time to identify who you are, what matters to you, what you bring to the table, and then having a really clear picture of that, being able to articulate your own purpose can guide your decisions and your behaviors as you move through your career and your education. Transcendence is just like find that ability to do something amazing, to kind of rise above the daily norm and feel like in your work, you're like, yeah, just did like the most amazing thing. Think about the best team experience you've ever had. And then again, storytelling, really, really important, being the author of your own narrative and making sure that the story that you tell aligns with who you truly are, with your values and your purpose. Next slide. So let's talk specifically about job crafting itself. This is a process, it's a design process that was created by some psychology professors at both Stanford and Yale and worked together to kind of work this out. And it's a really cool process that you can use to look at the role that you're in currently. That's kind of how it was designed, is looking at research around how people perceive their own work, whether they find meaning in it or not, and what are the components of that. Again, we want to have jobs where we feel engaged, we feel satisfied, we're able to kind of bounce forward from any challenges that we face in our work, and we really can identify as thriving in our work. And so this is a process where you take a look, and I'll walk you through the steps because it's really fun to do. You take a look at kind of how you currently view your job, and then you layer it over with all of these other components that are really, really important to living a good life. And the way that you can kind of tweak and redesign either your current job, or you can use this process to reverse engineer your future you. So being able to identify that and then kind of work backwards from there. But the three things that you can do when you're looking at redesigning a job and making it more meaningful to yourself are looking at just basically the stuff that you do all day, the tasks. You know, do you do more? Do you do less? That kind of thing. And then what are your relationships with the people that you work with and the people that you serve? And you might be able to change, you know, some of those and some of the patterns of interaction. And then the one that I feel is the most important and made the biggest difference for me is cognitive crafting. And that's how do I change the way I think about my work to see more meaning in it, to really kind of hear that calling of this is the thing I have to do. This is the thing that means the most to me and the thing I can't not do. Next slide. So these are the steps. The first one is to create a before sketch, and I'll show you examples of all this. We'll walk through it. The second is to kind of take that before sketch, put that aside, and then do a lot of self-reflection. So just like BDJ was talking about, you want to be able to write all this stuff down. So I'll show you some assessments that you can use, but really being able to have language to tell your story, to tell the story of what makes you amazing, to tell the story of what you care about and what you really hope to do in the world. And so then you kind of take that set of ingredients and you overlay it on what's currently happening. And you could also, if you want to future craft, you can kind of take a look at maybe a job description of something that's interesting to you, and that can be your before sketch. And then you're aligning all of, you know, your personal details over the top of that and seeing what it looks like. And so you're going to match those to the activities, the responsibilities, the tasks of the job, and determine, does this make sense? Are there places where things don't align? And then you're going to take a look at those three opportunities of redesigning your tasks, your relationships, and the way you look at your work, and make a plan to kind of move forward in this new amazing role. Next slide. So this is a before sketch, an example of a before sketch, and I think almost everybody can relate to this giant meeting block. What you do is you take a list, you make a list of your activities, and then think about how much of your time and energy each one takes. And then you kind of sketch those by block. And you can do this any way that makes sense to you. You can draw it, you can do it digitally. I like to use Post-it notes so that I can kind of move them around. And so you have this initial slide. So put that aside. And then next slide, you're gonna kind of do some reflection. So the who, why, how of who you are. Go through all of these questions, try to answer them. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What are your strengths? All of these things, really being able to articulate these details about yourself. Next slide. I like to recommend for strengths, the VIA Character Survey. You can take it for free at viacharacter.org. It's a really, really inclusive assessment that came from some research, a huge research study, both kind of across history and across cultures, and ended up with these 24 that are universally endorsed, and they're considered and have been research has shown they're the core of who we are as humans. They are the ingredients that make us the best that we can be. And these are, everybody has them kind of in a different place. And if research shows if you get to use them in your life and at work, you're 18 times more likely to flourish. Next slide. Another thing that you're going to want to do is really be able to articulate your values. So this is, if there's lots of different ways that you can do that and kind of identify what they are, but this is a list. Go through this list, get just like down to 3. What are the 3 most important things for you? So 3 strengths, 3 values, and go ahead, next slide. And one last consideration that I think is a really important piece to overlay is to write your regrets out. So a book just came out about a huge study on people's regrets, and mostly they were things people didn't do, and they had to do with not doing the work. So I didn't take the classes, I didn't, try to do the entry-level job, I didn't do the right thing. So always knowing what your right thing is, what is meaningful to you. Connection, not connecting with the right people. So making sure you connect with the people that do the things that you love. And then finally, not taking the risk. So make sure that you write some courage into your plan. Next slide. So this is kind of the first step in the alignment. So we took that initial sketch of like, here's all the stuff I do all day and here's how long it takes me, and aligned strengths are in pink, values are in blue, and aspirations are in yellow. And you can see that kind of that meeting and that email chunk that most of us have doesn't really align with anything that's meaningful to us. And so what can we do about that? Go ahead to the next slide. And so these are the opportunities for redesign. This is the really fun part to take a look at, whether you're looking at your current position or you're kind of reverse engineering from a position that you're thinking about, or a line of work or career or study that you're thinking about. And so some of the opportunities are maybe to talk to your teammates about redistributing tasks of those that are energizing to you, not so energizing to other people. I always try to trade my spreadsheets to other people because they're not energizing to me. And then thinking about the relationships that you have with people, sometimes collaborating with other people, doing things together can be much more meaningful. And then finally, just kind of redesigning the way you think about your work based on what's important to you and how you can touch that. So this person realized that something that was really important to them is equity, and they were able to join the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at their organization. And it made a huge difference in the way that they perceived some of the day-to-day work, knowing it was contributing to this greater cause. Next slide. And then finally, for implementation, make sure that you do all the important stuff. So be brave. This person wants to be a leader and didn't have any opportunities to do that. And so they were actually able to ask for that. They connected with people. They were like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask. And in so many cases, if you just ask about something and you can explain it, you can kind of tell your story about why this is important to you or why it's meaningful, then people will embrace you and allow you to do it. And so this whole example of kind of this layering of work and thinking about the things that are meaningful to us, the way that we can create an environment for ourselves that we can bring our best selves to the table. This actually worked for me in that I was working in career services for a very long time, but started taking on some new positive psychology responsibilities, actually creating them for myself, ended up turning into a full-time position and an opportunity to teach the course. So I'm kind of the poster child for this process, but it can be really, really meaningful. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And that's the last one, I think. So once you kind of got to that point of like, yes, I have these steps, just like BDJ said, what are you going to do on Monday? Go and do these things, go ask about it. Kind of take the opportunity to change your perspective and look at your work, whatever it is, with new energy and focus. Make yourself accountable for it. Definitely experiment. Do some stuff that scares you, do some stuff that you wouldn't normally do, connect with people, reach out to people, and you'll be really surprised about what can happen. Next slide. So kind of at the end of the day, all we want to do is know that we used our best self to make a difference for somebody else. And this is one of the ways you can do that.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I do think we have just a few moments here, if you don't mind a quick Q&A.
Absolutely.
So again, everybody, if you do have any questions for Carrie Sanderson, feel free to utilize that Q&A option. But I do have a good question here. So how can let's say our student employees, right, our working learners, how can we, or even the professional staff for that matter, how can we approach a manager to ask about changing our current role or adding more activities that might interest me? So giving me more of those tasks that I do enjoy. How might I approach my manager?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I talk about this a lot and the managers kind of go, like people are going to want to completely change their role. I think if you've done the work and you have a really good reason for doing it and it makes sense, your manager is definitely going to listen. They're going to be, one of the people that wants to help you be the best you can be. And if you're coming up with some really interesting ideas, maybe some new ways to do things, you just want to have done the work and thought through it. I've actually done this process with teams. And it's kind of fun for everybody to do the self-reflection and the self-assessment, kind of come to the table with, here are my strengths, and everyone can see each other's profiles and kind of talk about that, and basically throw most of the tasks in the middle of the table and then divvy them up so that everyone's excited about doing different things, because there's always somebody that's excited about the spreadsheets and I'm like, thank you, like that's amazing, I love that you love that. And everybody's a little bit different, but you all kind of care, especially in education, you care about the same things. And so you look at that bigger picture again, that thread of meaning, that thread of engagement. It's, people are more productive, more energetic, more excited when they're able to bring their best selves to the table.
Thank you. Another question I have here, what is your advice for if you feel like you can't do these things due to time, finances, maybe other aspects that are just out of my control? Do you have any advice on how we could
do like the assessments or make the changes?
Make the changes, I'm assuming.
So starting small, starting really, really small. For me, my example of kind of like just creating my own job, because I just started volunteering for things, started small. I had homework when I was doing my program. And so I would ask a faculty member, hey, do you mind if I try this assignment as homework for your class? Can we see how it works? And, kind of your enthusiasm in selling it is a really key point. And just really, really small, starting small, kind of learning. There's a lot of free resources for things that maybe you want to learn about on your own. You can always find people to talk about it. I've just made, I get excited to talk about well-being. And so I've made just some incredible connections. And when you are able to tell that story of either the current you or the future you with that conviction and that kind of sense of purpose, it definitely, people will get excited about it too. I think people want to help you when they know how to help you. When you have something specific, then they will definitely do as much as they can to help you.
Wonderful. And this next question is, again, kind of a two-part question. I'm going to go ahead and read all of it, but of course can break it down for you as needed. So how strongly does this idea of positive psychology and well-being correlate with the idea of a growth mindset? Because a lot of people have trouble with getting into that growth mindset, especially if it's not common for them. So what would you recommend to those who tend not to think so positively and or may not be in that growth kind of mindset?
Oh, I love that question. Growth mindset is kind of the origination of positive psychology, and it's one of the most foundational concepts to understand. And actually, Dr. Marty Seligman, who's kind of considered the founder of positive psychology, is a big grumpy pessimist himself. And that's how this whole thing started, is that there's kind of a famous story that his daughter called him out on it. She was like 5 years old, and she said, I stopped whining. Like, I made a promise on my 5th birthday that I was going to stop whining. If I can stop whining, you can learn how to not be grumpy, Dad. And so he tells that story, and it's so funny that you kind of have to have your own experience with it and understand how much it holds you back. And a lot of times people can have growth mindsets for other people. So like, yeah, I believe in the power of education. You can learn everything. You can, develop your strengths. But when it comes to themselves, they have stories that they grew up with that are really, really limiting. And so you have to make the effort to do it yourself. And again, kind of, making little wins and celebrating the progress along the way. And so, kind of testing it out of like, okay, I have something that I want to learn. Maybe I'm a perfectionist, and so I don't want people to see me learning. I don't want to make any mistakes, but trying something that will, again, kind of being brave, you will regret not taking these chances and learning more. And so really challenging yourself to take steps to learn new things and kind of open up to that. And the science of well-being works, and it's simple, small, little practices that can make a really big difference.
And to be completely honest, that was just another perfect segue to get into our next session. So with that being said, thank you again, Carrie, so much for joining us today. Again, a quick quote, and I may have this just a little wrong, but a quick quote that I got from you was, we not only feel valued, but we also add value, right? So I think that's a huge part to keep in mind with the work that we're doing, the teams that we're part of. But also, you said, do some stuff that scares you. Challenge yourself, get out of your comfort zone. And I love that. I'm constantly, not just for myself, but for my working learners, and encouraging my colleagues, constantly push yourself, challenge yourself, get out of that comfort zone, right? Continue to grow. So Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so with that being said, we will move into our final section of the Work Plus conference today. We'll be getting into a working learner Q&A, discussing how to get the most out of your current jobs. So one of our goals here with the Work Plus program is to give students, all of you working learners, opportunities that you may not have the chance to take advantage of in your day-to-day tasks. So with that being said, like Carrie just mentioned, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, doing things that challenge you. I'm super excited to introduce the moderator for this Q&A, who just happens to be a fellow working learner, also a first-year student here at ASU. So kind of pushing Mr. Mason Whitaker out of his comfort zone today. But Mason, I will go ahead and let you take it over and get us started with our Q&A with our working learners.
Great. Thank you so much, Abby. I am excited to be here, excited for this opportunity. As she mentioned, I am a first-year student here at ASU, and I am a working learner, have been for only about 3 weeks. So yeah, we're all here to learn, and we're really excited to hear from our panelists here today. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's get started by giving Allison and Crystal a chance to introduce themselves, so that you guys all have an opportunity to understand a little more of who we're talking with here. So Allison, if you'd like to go first, maybe just briefly tell us who you are and what you do, and then if Crystal, if you want to go after that.
Sure. Thank you, Mason. I am Allison Burke. I'm originally from Chicago, but I am currently a senior studying here at ASU. I am studying marketing at the W.P. Carey School of Business, and I started my working learner position in January of this year. So I'm very excited to share my experience with you guys.
Okay, I'm Crystal. I'm from California. I'm currently a junior. My major is psychology and I minor in justice studies as well. I started working for WorkPlus like last January, I think. I work as an experiential learning program assistant, and I also work in the financial aid as well.
Awesome, thank you. So as we go along, we're going to ask you guys some questions, and for everybody that's here with us today, this is sort of like the application of what we've just learned from the front lines, so to speak. So these are two working learners that have a lot of experience and that have been trained, that have been using these professional development resources to develop themselves. And so we're kind of able to see the fruits of the things that we've just learned and that we're all currently working on. As we talk, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to throw in, go ahead and add it to the Q&A section, and then maybe we'll just see if Abby wants to interrupt when somebody puts a question in. So the first question that we wanted to ask is, how do you feel that your working experience right now is preparing you for your future career?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. I think beginning my position, there was definitely a lot of mutual navigation between me and my supervisor, kind of trying to find my niche within the office. But after working on multiple projects, it becomes obvious where your points of strength are and how you can best utilize them. And I can definitely say that I feel like I'm an integral part of my team now. Just kind of going into the office, knowing that it's a safe space, not being afraid of failure, just kind of trying everything through trial and error. It helps you really find your role and what you think you would be best at moving forward.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing that. Crystal, would you add anything?
Yeah, kind of like to piggyback on that. And also like on previous, like what Brian said about just being curious, I feel like this position has helped me become a lot more curious, because like at first, I would kind of like limit myself and just be afraid to try new things. But now as I do like WorkPlus, I'm just like excited to see new experience and what I could learn, especially like with learning about just things like Excel or like spreadsheets and such. I was always like afraid to try stuff like that. And like now, I'm like pretty good at it. And even like with research, that's what I want to do later on in life. Like I realize like now that I am in research, we use those like both a lot. So like this position has helped me, be able to grow something in what I'm actually interested in. So that's what I'm able to see while like working this position.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So it sounds like, just the navigation of a new environment is a skill that Allison picked up pretty quickly. And then for Crystal, she's learning things that are going to be valuable for her in her specific career, but probably in any career, something like Excel and some of those other programs. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that. How do you feel that your future career goals and maybe your plans to achieve those goals, how have they changed as you've been a working learner?
I don't think mine have necessarily changed, but I think coming into this position, I've gotten a much clearer picture of what I hope to do following graduation. just being in the office and discussing with your supervisors what your ultimate career goals are helps them better understand how they can assist you in reaching those. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with multiple people within my department, just discussing what I want to do in my future, and receiving positive reinforcement is definitely a huge part of that. Feeling supported by your team, like BDJ was saying, is very, very key in gaining valuable experiences.
Yeah, I would say mine like didn't necessarily change that much. If anything, just like it helped like benefit me a lot more. Sort of like I said in the beginning, like experiencing new things. Like that's why I wanted to take on that minor justice studies, just to, like learn a lot more and like see how else I can grow. And even just make more connections or networking opportunities, which I feel like this like position has helped me like learn to do something like that rather than being stuck in like my own shell, just like going out there and like just seeing what else the world has to offer for me, like what I can offer as well. And then, just making that connection like with my job and like trying to benefit on like being more professional or just like inclusive or anything like that. So
Yeah, that's really cool. It's almost like the working learner environment didn't exactly change where you're planning on going, but it actually made it more clear. Started to help you start to iron out some of those details. I like that answer a lot. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, this next question, it sort of has two parts. So before you started working, were you worried about graduating, about starting your career? And if the answer is yes, does your student employment position as a working learner, has that helped to manage some of those nerves or some of the anxieties around graduating and starting a career and kind of getting into the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having fear and worries is a natural part of growing up, and especially coming to the end of my time here at ASU, it's very scary. It's always going to be scary of the unknown. So I think coming into this position has definitely washed away some of those worries for me. First of all, just knowing that I have such a strong support system and so many people in my corner within the office is just reassuring in itself. But also coming into the position, not knowing anything about marketing and what a career in marketing entails was definitely terrifying. But since being here in January, I am so much more confident in all of my marketing skills. I have gotten so much hands-on experience, and through collaborating with not only my supervisors, but other people in the department, I've gained a lot of great experience that I know I will translate directly into a professional setting.
Yeah, I could definitely make that connection. Coming to school, I was like a first generation, so I knew absolutely nothing when it came to college and like really nothing what I wanted to do. I just knew I like was interested in psychology. And like just as I like continue to push myself forward and like just trying to like obtain a new job position and such, I at first was afraid of that too. I didn't think I could do school and work, and I didn't know like how it could, benefit me in any type of ways. But like now that I have been in this position, I've learned a lot. Sort of like Allison said, with like the support system, I just feel like they're always here to support me. But then also, like as I'm utilizing around experiential learning, I learned a lot that like my grades aren't the main thing, or like they're a part of it, but there's so much more than just focusing on my grades. Kind of like what else am I learning? Like when I was first beginning school, I didn't think I could be a part of research. Like I didn't think I was like smart enough for it, but like this job has helped me like push myself and just like try to apply for labs and everything, and like anything else like study abroad or like clubs and organizations. Like it just helped me see that like I should try to like make those connections, and I should try other opportunities that the school has to offer and the resources, rather than just being so head focused on like only my academics, because that's not like everything I'm going to learn for real world. So I definitely feel like this Work Plus has helped me a lot with that. And that's made me not so nervous for like graduating everything, because I have all these other factors to contribute into my life, rather than just saying like, hey, I had all A's in college,
Yeah, I like that. It seems like you both kind of agreed that being a working learner and being within the program helped you see the bigger picture, which is what helps to kind of alleviate some of those nerves. So I like that. Thanks for sharing. So we've got about 5 minutes left. We'll see if we can get two more questions here. So what can working learners do now? Maybe going along with what we heard earlier, what can they do Monday immediately to be more ready for their careers when the time comes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think something that I've learned throughout my time in this position is that you get as much out of it as you put into it. Showing up to work and doing the bare minimum is not going to be beneficial for either party. So being active and open to new opportunities is a huge part of success in student employment. And even just making and maintaining connections with familiar faces in your office can land you some pretty cool opportunities. That's exactly how I ended up on this panel today. Thank you, Abby. But yeah, just I think being active in your office, making sure that you're seeking opportunities and letting your supervisors know what your end goal is extremely important.
Yeah, Allison like basically hit it for what I was gonna say as well, but kind of just to like carry on to that, I would say communicate as well. Like, just continue to talk if it's about anything. Like, it doesn't always have to be about work. It could be like what's going on in like your school life or just a club or anything. Just continue to communicate because it's kind of like what she said. You don't know who someone else knows, and you don't know where that could get you in life. And just to even like let your supervisor know, like, sometimes like we're afraid of talking to our supervisors, but we never know like how much they could truly be there for us and like how connected we can get and like what they can do for us as well for further things. So I would definitely just say make sure to just communicate as much as you can. If you're afraid, like maybe start with like written on Slack or something, but just try to get out there.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's almost frustrating because we're afraid of what's going to help us the most. And so we just got to get out and we got to have those conversations. So the last question, what advice, now that you have the experience that you have, what advice would you give to other student workers to help them get the most out of their job?
Yeah, I think that ties into last question. And like Crystal said, just being open and honest with your supervisors, communicating with them, creating a healthy balance between like a genuine mentor relationship and also maintaining your work expectations. Work doesn't always have to be boring. You can come in and talk to your supervisors and become friendly with them because they're always going to be there to support you. But just having the thought in the back of your head that you always want to exceed expectations will just give you that fire to keep going and just reaching out for new opportunities and always trying to do better, I think is just a great way to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, don't limit yourself, just try for whatever. Kind of like, again, what Brian said, be curious, like you never know what something can do for you. So just continue to try for things, even if you think you're not like successful in it. Kind of like what Mason just said, like we're afraid of like what can help us the most. And like, one of my favorite quotes is like, fear is not that we're inadequate, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. So like, don't, dim your light, like continue, keep going and like communicate, make connections and just try.
I like that. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Just try, do everything you can. And so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the panel. We appreciate you, Crystal and Allison, for being here with us. And to all the student learners, it's like they mentioned, take what we've learned today and maybe don't even wait till Monday. Do it now. Okay, well, we'll go back to Abby and further wrap up.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Crystal and Allison, for joining us today. As Mason said, we truly appreciate you taking the time to give us your insights. Mason, of course, thank you to you. All three of you stepping outside of your comfort zone. Mason leading that discussion. You all did a wonderful job. I do just want to highlight something that Allison, you'd said, be active and search for those opportunities, whether that's, like she said, in your office specifically, or even more so, university-wide, right? So as Allison mentioned, her and I started talking one day in office, and that is how she is on this panel today. So if there's anybody in the audience watching and you think you might be interested, you would like the opportunity to do something like this, please reach out to me, reach out to the program office in general. I'd love to connect with you there. And then something both Allison and Crystal really hit on was talk with your supervisor. Talk to them about your end goals, whether it's your professional goals, your personal goals, school goals, whatever it may be. Talk with your supervisor. Again, they both mentioned too, you don't know what they know or who they might know that they might be able to connect you with. So keeping that in mind. Again, thank you all three of you for joining us today. It really means a lot to me. As we do wrap up the conference today, if we could get the slide deck back up just one more time for us. A quick reminder that we do have many different events throughout the year, including one this Friday. So this Friday, we will be partnered with the Career and Professional Development Services team. We have an event highlighting the best interview practices. You can view our events that we have throughout the semester on our website. The link will be added to the chat now for you all. Or if you're interested in this Friday's event, you can simply scan that QR code on the left-hand side. It'll take you straight to our registration link, and I'll get you that calendar hold so you can join us on Friday. Additionally, if you didn't know, we do have an Instagram page that is completely run by our Work Plus working learners. Again, just giving them those opportunities and different experiences in their day-to-day tasks. So give us a follow on Instagram to stay up to date with our events, receive different tips to stay successful in the Work Plus program in your future careers. But with that being said, thank you again to both Brian David Johnson and Carrie Sanderson for joining us today. And then, of course, thank you to our working learners that were able to join us and give us your insights. And then, of course, a big thank you to all of you in the audience that joined us today. Again, check out our events page. I'd love to see you at future events. But until then, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks.